Today, guys, we're going to talk a little bit about scammers. Scammers are everywhere. Everybody knows about it. Everybody's heard about it. You have all kinds of scammers. You have people that are online scamming people every day. You have customers that are scamming contractors. You have contractors that are scamming customers. The list just goes on and on and on about this stuff. It's getting to the point where it's ridiculous. I'm going to give you 6 different examples of scams that I know of, that I've personally been involved in. And at the end of the day, I hope you guys share your stories down below and try to help educate the public a little bit about scams that you've been involved with. All right. First one I'm going to tell you guys about is this guy who was a general contractor, and he was the head of a builders association. The guy approached me and he said, "Hey, I hear good things about you. I would like for you to come over to my place. I'm building one of these parade of houses, and I'd like for you to come and give me an estimate for the landscaping." So I did. The guy calls me back the very next day, and he says, "Hey, George, I really like your bid." He said, "It's between you and another guy, and the only problem is this guy belongs to the association and you don't." I said, "Okay, so what does that mean?" He's like, "Well, I'd really like to get you to join, and if you join, I'll give you the contract." Well, that was basically bribing me to join the Builders Association, okay? And it was $300, and I thought to myself, okay, this guy's the president of that association. So if I do a really good job for him, I'm going to get tons of work, right? That's what you would think. So I agreed to it. I paid the $300. I went to do the job, and it consisted of a paver patio, retaining wall, putting in a lawn, and some planters, okay? So that being said, I couldn't get the first half down, okay? And that was always a pet peeve of mine, to get the first half. It was like a $22,000 contract. I require half that down, right? So couldn't get the money. And again, I'm telling myself, hey, something's up with this. It's odd that I don't get the money. And I let my guard down because I truly believe that this guy, being the president of this association, would never screw me, right? That was my thought. Well, it was horrible right from the beginning. The guy would bring me, he asked me, he says, and so you guys watch out for this. He wanted to buy everything. He said, "Hey, George, what are you paying for your brick? Because I know the guys at County Concrete, and I can get a really good deal with those guys." And I'm just like, "What does it matter, Jim? It's in my price, right?" And he's just like, "Well, I can get a better price, so why don't you just let me buy the brick, and we'll just take that out of the bid." And I knew better than to do it, but I did it because I was trying to please this guy. I thought there was no way he was going to screw me, because he's not just some guy. He's the head of this great big organization, right? This Builders Association. So I'm like, just do it. So I took it out of my bid. And the next thing you know, a pallet of those show up, and they're cracked, they're chipped. They look like they fell off a truck. So I'm dealing with all this crap, trying to make everything work. And of course, when I would take my compactor across them, even if they didn't look broke, half of them broke, or not half of them, but I mean a bunch of them. So it was just a freaking mess, right? Then it came time to do the retaining wall. Same thing. He talked me out of it, let him provide the materials. Same thing with the topsoil. So he basically provided all the materials for this job, right? And so he got it, chopped down. It was like $11,000 contract, you might as well say. All right. Bottom line is, he had me do all these little extras for him all the time. He just kept giving me that little pat on the back, like, "Oh, you're just great, you're awesome." And then, end of the day, job's all done. I finally told him, I says, "Jim," I said, "I can't do any more of this. I can't do any more extras. I've got people clamoring on me. I should have been there. You guys should have saw the topsoil. Filled with rocks, roots, the worst stuff you've ever saw. Just horrible. We were forever and a day. I mean, it took us literally almost 3 times as long to put that lawn in. I lost 2 days extra on that job that I should have been working on other people's jobs. Then they were clamoring at me. So I told him, I said, "Jim, I can't do this anymore. I can't do any more extras. I have to move on. This is terrible." He would make me rob from Peter to pay Paul. I was stealing dirt from here to put it over there. He wouldn't bring me any more dirt to finish the thing. I mean, it was a nightmare from start to finish, just because he was cheap, So, that being said, when the job was done, that day he wanted to take us out for beers, and it was like 9 o'clock at night. "Oh, let me take you boys down to the corner here, and I'll buy you guys a couple of beers, and you guys did such a good job." And no, I can't do that, Jim. If I could just get my check, I really need to move on. And he's just like, "Oh, I don't have my checkbook on me." Really? Yeah, doesn't have his checkbook on him. At that point, I was like, ah, man, I'm getting a shaft in this guy. But I'm like, okay, the guys want to go home. It's already after 9 o'clock at night. Like, listen, I'll be back here tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Will you have your checkbook then? Oh, yeah, I'll have it. I was back there at 7 o'clock. Guy was gone. Couldn't get him on the phone. Bottom line, I ended up back at his place like 2 weeks later, and I called this guy, call and call and call and call. Any other time you could get him on the phone, but of course now I can't, right? So I know I'm being screwed. So I'm like, I'm gonna kill this son of a bitch, you know. And I showed up at his place at like 6 o'clock in the morning because I knew what time he left for work every day, and it was always at like 6:30, between 6:30 and 7. So I was there at 6 o'clock. Sure enough, his truck's there. I got him now, right? The guy, I can see him peeking around the corner in the house. He would not come to the door. Next thing I know, 2 sheriff's departments vehicles come up behind me, and they're of course his buddies, and they're kicking me out of there because I'm not from that town, you know. And they're just like, you got to get out of here. You trespassing. The owner wants you gone. Don't you ever come back. Blah blah blah. So had to take this guy to court. Took about 7 years to get him there. Cost me about almost $15,000 in lawyer fees to get him there. The judge found in my favor. And he awarded, you know what he awarded me? He awarded me the cost of the courts. That's it. That's it. I couldn't get the money from my lawyer, nothing. Come to find out later, he was golfing buddies with this judge. So that's the screwing that I got from this guy. All right, that's one story. Story number 2. There's a landscape guy that I was familiar with, and he had... apparently he had been going around and just collecting money from people and not doing the work, right? I got so many calls from, I don't know, probably half dozen landscape people or customers. They weren't my customers in the beginning, and they're just calling me up saying, hey, this guy screwed me. He took my money and he never came back. And I guess from what they said he was doing, and again, I don't know this because I wasn't directly involved in it, but they said he would go there and instead of getting the half down, a lot of times he demanded or wanted all the money up front, and then he would just take the money and run. So that's just a terrible thing, and it's a terrible way to do business, and it gives everybody a black eye. But it does happen. I mean, you know, I have used to do jobs on the handshake that the guy would pay me at the end of the day. You know, I would do a landscape project for him, and early on I would make these mistakes, and I would go there and I'd do the whole job. Well, after you get screwed a couple times from these people, all of a sudden you know, they tell you to kick you off their property. They're not going to pay you. Now suddenly there's something wrong with your work. There's nothing wrong with your work. These guys are just screwing you out of money. I had a buddy of mine that was a landscaper, and I actually bought him out. But prior to that, he did like a $5,000 landscape job for this one customer. And when it came time to get paid, it was the same thing. Like, he got his half down. It was a $10,000 job, but they still owed him $5,000. And when he was done with the whole job, there was nobody around. He couldn't get his money. They had left town. In the meantime, they sold the property, right? They used him to get the property all up to snuff and looking really good, and then they sold it, and he never did get his money. So that's something else where he got scammed. So there's always that element there, even if you get half down, and that's what I do. I get half down ahead of time, and I get the other half the day of completion, and I make sure they understand that. I'm going to be done tomorrow. You better be here tomorrow with that check, and if you're not, you're going to get an ass whooping. So that's that. All right, next thing. While I was doing commercial landscaping, and I did a ton of it at one time, and we were all over the state. I had crews all over the place doing it. And this one great big company, they had hired us to do 35-acre landscape. It was huge, just a massive place. They were actually a packaging company. They'd make like the cellophane wrappers and stuff on candy bars. And they were a huge company, multi-million-dollar company, easy, right? Those guys had me do all these extras on the job. They were just like, yeah, you know, I know you're short on soil and whatnot, but here, we're going to dig way over there. And if you can haul it over here and put it all in. It was all supposed to be rough graded in for me. And all I was supposed to do was come and finish the job, right? Well, didn't happen that way. These guys had me do all the extras, and they kept telling me, oh, just keep track of it. Just keep track of it. We'll take care of you in the end. They took care of me all right with a stiff one right up the keister. That's what they did with me. That's how they took care of me. So they told me, I don't have anything in writing from you, so you're not going to get paid. That was the bottom line. Where I screwed up, I should have had change orders done, and I should have shut down my operations completely and Never done a thing past that. If it got to the point where it's like, look, and I needed the topsoil to finish the lawn, right? But if I don't finish that, now keep in mind, this was, I don't know, probably a $150,000 landscape deal. And if I don't finish that lawn within a certain amount of time, I don't get paid. They didn't have things rough graded in. Their rough grade guy, he split. Something happened with him. That was my first sign there was trouble. And I mean, you see it happen from time to time, you know. All of a sudden the electricians will quit or the plumbers will quit. Something's happened, right? And it could be a dispute over anything. I've walked off jobs already where I've had disputes with people and refused to come back until things were straightened around. But regardless, I did it on the old pat on the back, George. Don't worry, we'll take care of you, buddy. We'll take care of you. Yeah, they took care of me, all right. Anyway, that one cost me, I think, about $17,000 in extras that I never got paid for. And what I found out was the more commercial work I did, the more fucking I got. That's what I found out. I mean, I just felt like a sex doll after a while. I'm so glad I got out of that, man. I'll never look back. Never look back on that, and I'm not getting into it anymore. I've just had enough. The only jobs I do now are from select contractors that I have worked with over the years that are local guys from my town. Them are the only guys I work with. I don't work with anybody else anymore on commercial stuff. That being said, there's a guy in our town who's a local contractor. And what he does, he goes in and he bids these city jobs, okay? So any of the work that has to be done on the streets, going in and putting storm sewer lines in, redoing streets, all that kind of stuff. This guy is winning the bids all the time. And what I found out from going to these meetings, because when they unveil all the bids, he was always the lowest guy, always. And what he did, I watched this guy do it over and over again because I'd be on some of these jobs too. There'd be landscaping on them. The projects would get shut down because all of a sudden he would come up with one problem or another where he needed a change order done. He needed that change order for more money because he ran into this or he ran into that. So he'd automatically bid these things super low, knowing he's going to get it. And then he came in with one change order after another, and a lot of them was before he even broke ground. So that was his scam. That's what he did. He continues to do it to this day. And our city knows about it. And you know what the city said when we brought it to their attention that what he's doing, and he does it all the time? You know what they told me? Well, we don't want to piss him off because if we do, he'll stop doing work for the city. You know what, dude? There's other people that can do that same job. But this guy's just a frickin' moron. He's in the pockets, of these two. They're in cahoots. I don't even know if that's a real word. Maybe look it up. Cahoots. And see if it is. I don't know. Anyway, that's that guy. The Builders Association. Remember that story I told you about how the guy had me join the Builders Association? Okay. Well, they have a meeting, and you're supposed to go to this meeting once a month, right? I'm sitting around the table, my wife and I, and we're listening to these guys talk about how they screw customers. They're bragging about it. They're sitting at the table. I remember distinctly listening to this one guy. He was talking about how he would, for shingles on the roof, instead of number ones all the time, he would bill the customer for number ones, but they were like number twos or number threes or whatever it is. And they were way worse, and they did the same with the lumber. They did it with everything. They literally, it was like going to prison. You sat there and you listened to these two people tell each other how to fuck the customer. That's what it was. That's what happened at that meeting. And we went to it one time, and I told my wife, I said, these guys are a bunch of crooks. We need to get out of this thing. And we never went back to another one. And it wasn't just these couple of guys at my table. You could hear no matter where I went. If you go up to the bar up there to have a beer, there's guys there. And, it's all these builders and stuff that are all coming together, all these contractors. And you just listen to their stories. It's like like I say, talk about being in prison. You know how you teach each other how to steal better? Well, dude, you know what your mistake was, man? You should have had a mask on. That's what these guys were doing. They were teaching them how to screw the customers and not get caught. Anyway, that's them. And the very last one I'm going to tell you guys about is just the other day, my right-hand guy ordered this thing. It's an online scam. And what it was a laser rust removing tool, okay? Apparently, they do have good ones out there that are cost mega thousands of dollars. And he ordered this one, it was $40. It was a little handheld thing, and they just got him on that the other day. He can't get his money back. These people vanish. My parents, actually, I'm going to tell you one more. My parents, They called me up one day, and my son's name is Georgie. I call him Georgie, right? And his name is George too. And my mom calls me up, and she's frantic, and she's like, "Where's Georgie at?" And I'm like, "Well, he's in work, you know. He lives in a different town, you know." And I said, "He's at work. Why?" I had just talked to my son the night before on the phone, and my mom is like, "Oh no, he's in a Mexican jail." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "Mom, he's not in a Mexican jail." And she's like, "Yes, he's in a Mexican jail. He just called me. You ask your dad. Your dad was on the phone with him too." And I'm like, "Just put Dad on." My mom is all frantic. Get on the phone with my dad. My dad is like, yep, it was Georgie. It was Georgie. And I'm like, "Dad, I just talked to him last night. He's in Appleton. He is not where you think he is. He is not in Mexico." But apparently, he was telling my parents that they had to send him $5,000 to get out of jail. Otherwise, they were going to keep him in jail, and it's a terrible place, and people are getting murdered there. And I mean, and my mom looks at this thing like, she's like, "Well, how did they know? How did they know his name?" And I'm like, "They probably got it from you, Mom." You know, I could just see this. I mean, I wasn't there when this call happened, but I can see my mother, and I can see how this would work. They would call up, and what they did, and Mom told me this. My mom was like, well, the first words out of their mouth was, "Grandma, is that you?" Well, when they say grandma, and then of course my mom probably thought, well, which one of my grandkids does that sound like? And she probably said something, "Georgie, is that you?" Well, now they know who you are. Yep, they sure did. They knew him by name, and he sounded just like him. I'm sure that's what transpired. But anyway, since then, and you would not believe what a time I had to convince my mother. I had to call my son at work. I sent him a text. I'm like, "Can you call me?" He called me, and because my mom was she was going to send that money. And she was hell-bent on sending that money. And I'm like, "Mom, don't you dare." So anyway, had to get my son to call my mother and convince her that he was fine and all that. Since then, she's been called 3 different times with the exact same scam. So, that being said, that's all I'm going to talk about the scamming deal anymore. It happens every day. I know it happens, and everybody takes precautions. I'll tell you something. That's why it's so difficult sometimes to, like, you know, even us selling franchises, like with the mosquito police thing. There's people are so used to getting scammed that they're so skeptical. They're afraid. Everybody's afraid to take any chances or to do anything anymore because there's so many scammers out there. Those scammers are just bastards. That's what they are. And they're all around the corner. I mean, what is with these guys? Do you really have to screw? I mean, everybody I told you about, do you have to screw people that hard? You need the money that bad? You're not good enough at your business? You can't go out and get a job, or you can't start your own small business and do things the right way and make money? You know, the rest of us are doing that. What's wrong with you? Hope you guys liked the video. If you do, hit the like button down below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the little notification bell, as we put out videos all the time. And if you want to get notified when the next one comes out, they'll notify you. Thanks for watching.